If you know one thing about the Three Kingdoms period of Chinese history, you probably know that Cao Cao was the villain. He is the treacherous chancellor who poisoned the Han dynasty from within. He is the man who said, "I would rather betray the world than let the world betray me." He is the pale, scheming antagonist to the heroic Liu Bei and the loyal Guan Yu. This image comes primarily from one source, The Romance of Three Kingdoms, a novel written by Luo Guanzhong in the 14th century. Over 1,000 years after Cao Cao died, the romance is a masterpiece of Chinese literature. It is also, by Luo Guanzhong's own admission, a story, a deliberately partial retelling that celebrates the Shuhan kingdom of Liu Bei and frames Cao Cao's Wei kingdom as the primary villain. It is not a history. Here is what Cao Cao actually was. Cao Cao was born in 155 CE during the Eastern Han dynasty, a period when the Han imperial family was increasingly weak and power was fragmenting among regional warlords and court factions. His grandfather was a eunuch who had risen to prominence in the imperial court, a detail that Cao Cao's enemies used against him throughout his life, since eunuch families were considered socially inferior by the Confucian scholar official class. Cao Cao received a classical education and showed early ability. He held several official positions in his 20s. He was appointed as a district magistrate and reportedly earned a reputation for strict, impartial enforcement of the law. He had a powerful official's relative executed for breaking curfew, which did not make him popular in the court, but established a pattern that would continue throughout his career. In 184 CE, the Yellow Turban Rebellion shook the Han dynasty. Large-scale peasant uprisings across multiple provinces weakened imperial control and gave regional military commanders the power and autonomy they needed to become independent warlords. Cao Cao raised troops and distinguished himself in suppressing the rebellion, earning military experience and a regional power base. The decade between 184 and 196 CE was chaos. The Han Emperor, a child, was manipulated first by the warlord Dongzhuo, who openly terrorized the court, and then passed between competing factions. Multiple warlords declared themselves semi-independent. The central government lost effective control of most of China. In this environment, the strongest military leaders were either expanding their territories, making alliances, or being killed. China was fracturing. Cao Cao made a calculation that shaped everything afterward. He chose to restore the emperor, rather than replace him. In 196 CE, he rescued Emperor Xian, who had been effectively a refugee, wandering with a shrunken court, and brought him to Shu, where Cao Cao was based. He installed the emperor in a proper capital, with a proper court. He then served as the emperor's chancellor. This arrangement has been characterized by critics, in the novel and elsewhere, as using the emperor as a puppet. And it was, in practical terms, exactly that. But it also gave Cao Cao something the other warlords lacked: legal legitimacy. Every military campaign he fought was officially an imperial campaign. Every territory he took was officially restored to the Han. Every opponent he defeated was officially a rebel. It was a masterstroke of political positioning. Between 196 and 208 CE, Cao Cao won a series of campaigns that unified northern China under his control. The most decisive was the Battle of Guandu in 200 CE. His opponent was Yuan Shao, a warlord who controlled a territory 3 to 4 times larger than Cao Cao's, with an army estimated at 100,000 men or more. Cao Cao had perhaps 20,000. The battle stretched on for months. Yuan Shao's sheer size should have won it. Then Cao Cao received intelligence that Yuan Shao's supply depot was at a location called Wuchao. He took a night strike force and burned it. Yuan Shao's army, suddenly without supplies, collapsed. The battle ended in complete victory for the smaller force. This kind of tactical intelligence, using information, speed, and precision to compensate for disadvantage in numbers, ran throughout Cao Cao's military career. He was not a man who relied on mass. He used his mind. He also wrote extensively on military strategy. His commentary on Sun Tzu's Art of War is one of the most significant in Chinese literature, and is still studied today. This part of Cao Cao's biography is almost never discussed in popular culture. He implemented the Tuntian system, military agricultural settlement. Under this system, soldiers and displaced civilians were given land to farm during peacetime, creating a sustainable food supply for military campaigns without the constant need for tax-funded logistics chains. It was innovative, practical, and effective. He reformed the tax system. The Han dynasty had relied on a complex, uneven tax structure that wealthy landowners could manipulate. Cao Cao simplified it, a grain tax, proportional and applied consistently. It was fairer than what it replaced. He patronized literature. The Jianan period, the era of his rule, is considered one of the great flowering periods of Chinese poetry. Cao Cao himself was a poet of genuine ability. He wrote about war, loss, ambition, and the passage of time in verses that are still anthologized in Chinese literary education. One of his most famous poems, "The sea stretches before me, so vast it cannot be crossed. Trees and grass flourish on the mountains. The autumn winds blow, the waves rise high. Sun and moon seem to rise from its waters. The galaxy of stars seems to issue from its depths. How magnificent is the spectacle! I intone these lines to express my joy." This is not the writing of a man without inner life. In 208 CE, Cao Cao made the decision that would define his legacy, and, in the Romance of Three Kingdoms, become his greatest defeat. He had unified the north. He moved south with a force of 200,000 men, possibly more, to complete the unification of China. He faced a combined force of Liu Bei and Sun Quan on the Yangtze River at a location called Red Cliffs. The battle was real. The outcome was real. Sun Quan's fireships destroyed much of Cao Cao's fleet, and disease spread through his army. He retreated north. What actually happened at Red Cliffs? What role Zhuge Liang played, how large the forces were, what exactly went wrong, is heavily disputed by historians. The Romance of Three Kingdoms version, written 1,000 years later, features dramatic scenes of supernatural strategy and divine weather. The historical sources are considerably more ambiguous. What is clear? Cao Cao's attempt to immediately unify all of China failed. He spent the rest of his life consolidating the north and preparing for another campaign that never came. Cao Cao died in 220 CE at the age of 65. He never made himself emperor. In 213 CE, the Han Emperor had granted him the title of Duke of Wei, and later King of Wei, the highest titles a non-imperial official could hold. But he did not take the final step. His son, Cao Pi, declared the end of the Han dynasty and proclaimed the Wei dynasty immediately after Cao Cao's death. This is often interpreted as Cao Cao having effectively been an emperor in everything but name, and, by extension, as evidence of his usurpation of the Han. But Cao Cao himself, in his writings, consistently claimed loyalty to the Han. Whether this was sincere or political calculation is a question historians have argued for centuries. Before his death, he left instructions for a simple burial. No extravagant tomb, no sacrifice of his concubines to accompany him, the resources to be used for more practical purposes. His tomb was discovered by archaeologists in Henan province in 2009. It was, as described, relatively simple for a man of his power. The romance of Three Kingdoms turned Cao Cao into the primary villain of one of China's most beloved stories. The novel was written during the Yuan dynasty, when China was under Mongol rule, and later popularized during the Ming. It glorified the Shu Han kingdom of Liu Bei, which claimed descent from the Han imperial family as the legitimate China. It cast Cao Cao as the usurper, the schemer, the man who destroyed the Han from within. But Cao Cao did not destroy the Han. He preserved it for 30 years longer than it might otherwise have lasted. When he could have made himself emperor, he did not. His son did. The historical Cao Cao was one of the most capable military commanders and administrators in Chinese history. He unified northern China. He reformed taxation and agriculture. He patronized literature and was himself a poet. He wrote the definitive early commentary on Sun Tzu. He was also brutal when he needed to be, capable of massacre and political ruthlessness when circumstances demanded it. But so was every ruler of his era. The question is not whether Cao Cao was a good man by modern standards. He was a warlord of the 3rd century. The question is whether the image of him as history's great villain, preserved through a 14th century novel, matches the man in the actual sources. It doesn't. He was more complicated, more capable, and more interesting than that. This is the Dragon Throne. History is written by the storytellers as much as by the historians. Sometimes it's worth checking what the sources actually say. Subscribe for more. New episodes every week.